There is a rumor so powerful, military instructors still whisper it to recruits today. It is illegal to shoot a human being with a .50 caliber machine gun. They say it violates the Geneva Conventions. They say you are only allowed to aim at equipment because the hydrostatic shock alone can crush a skull even if the bullet misses. But that is a lie. There is no treaty. No law forbids it. The truth about the M2 Browning is actually much more terrifying. It was built to do exactly what you think it does. And for over 100 years, it has been the most devastating infantry weapon on Earth. This is the story of Ma Deuce, the gun that breaks walls, ignores armor, and forced entire armies to change how they fight. To understand why this gun is so feared, you have to go back to the last year of World War I. General John Pershing had a massive problem. New armored planes and tanks were hitting the battlefield. And the US Army's standard .30 caliber bullets were just bouncing off them. Pershing needed a miracle. So he cabled the greatest firearms inventor in history, John Browning. Browning didn't build a new gun from scratch. He took his reliable M1917 machine gun, enlarged every critical dimension, and created a monster. He chambered it for a rimless cartridge twice the diameter and 5 times the mass of the old round. The early prototypes weighed a back-breaking 170 pounds of water jacket, tripod, and steel. But with every pull of the trigger, it smashed through armor plates that had laughed at rifle fire just a month earlier. The round was called the .50 BMG, and it didn't just change the battlefield, it dominated it. Let's talk pure physics. When a standard rifle bullet leaves the barrel, it carries roughly 3,000 joules of energy. When the .50 caliber leaves the M2, it hits with 13,000 joules. Even at a full kilometer away, it hits with the exact same force as a point-blank rifle shot. When a .50 hits mild steel, cavitation and spall pepper everything behind the plate. Splinters fly off the armor like shrapnel. By 1944, this chest-deep thump echoed from almost every American vehicle in Europe. When the German army, who had the terrifying, fast-firing MG-42, met the M2, they were stunned. The MG-42 was precise, but its 8mm Mauser round couldn't punch through engine blocks. The Americans called the .50 caliber the wall breaker. German machine gun crews hiding in brick houses suddenly weren't safe anymore. Sandbag bunkers collapsed after just 4-second bursts. A panzer tank hit from the side could lose its vision blocks, have its turret jammed completely, or suffer total track failure. German platoon leaders stopped charging positions with rifles. They whispered for snipers or anti-tank guns instead. Battle diaries from the Hürtgen forest complained of American strongpoints being completely impervious to normal rifle fire. But the M2 wasn't just king of the dirt, it ruled the sky. A single B-17 Flying Fortress bomber carried 13 M2s. When a formation of bombers flew over Germany, they created an overlapping net of half-inch tungsten and incendiary streaks that shredded anything flying into it. The P-47 Thunderbolt fighter plane carried 8 of them. When those planes swooped low over the Eastern Front, those 850s poured more lead per second than an entire company of infantry. Light tanks literally disintegrated under the strafing runs. But pure power destroys guns, so how did Browning make the M2 survive its own violence? The secret is a mechanical dance called short recoil operation. When the gun fires, the barrel and the bolt lock together and slide backward just a centimeter. This absorbs the massive chamber pressure right when the casing wants to stick. Then the bolt continues alone, yanking the smoking casing out, before a massive spring hurls it forward to strip a new round. This cycle repeats as long as a thumb presses the butterfly trigger. Because the receiver was basically open at the top, armorers could swap the feed mechanism in 90 seconds and flip the belt direction. You could feed it from the left or the right. German industry tried to copy it. Captured 50s fascinated the Wehrmacht. U-boat commanders begged for them to fight off strafing Allied planes. Even Krupp engineers manufactured German-coded .50 caliber belts, but German factories couldn't scale it. They fielded nothing comparable on the ground. But a gun is only as deadly as what it spits out, and the ammunition kept evolving into an absolute nightmare. Straitjacket ball rounds were just the beginning. The military introduced armor-piercing incendiary rounds with tracer flares. They didn't just punch through steel, they ignited fuel vapors inside planes and tanks. A hit could start a massive fire and sever control cables simultaneously. And then came the post-war Raufoss multi-purpose round. This wasn't just a bullet. It compressed a fragmentation charge, an explosive, and an incendiary charge behind a tungsten core. It turned a single projectile into a miniaturized 20mm cannon shell. If that wasn't enough, engineers created the saboted light armor penetrator. They took a dense tungsten dart, wrapped it in a plastic shoe, and sent it screaming through armor plates that ordinary rounds barely dented. But what happens when one M2 isn't enough? The Americans built the M45 Maxon mount. 4 M2s, electrically powered, spinning 360 degrees and firing 40 rounds per second. They called it the meat chopper. In Normandy, it shredded hedgerows. On the frozen hillsides of Korea, it stopped massive infantry charges in their tracks. In Vietnam, convoy commanders bolted these Quad 50s onto heavy trucks. When they got ambushed on jungle highways, they drove the ambush into dead silence with a massive wall of red tracers ricocheting through the trees. Yet for all its invincible power, the M2 had one fatal flaw, and it wasn't the gun, it was the man firing it. Operating the M2 on a vehicle made you the biggest target on the battlefield. The gunners had to stand exposed above the armor. They became glowing silhouettes against their own massive muzzle flashes. For decades, no shield protected their chests. If you were on the gun, every enemy sniper, mortar, and rifleman aimed at you first. In Vietnam, desperate crews started welding scrap metal and sandbags around the guns just to survive. It wasn't until the modern era that the military finally solved this with remote weapon stations. Today, cameras, thermal sights, and joysticks let soldiers remain safely inside armored vehicles, while the 100-year-old gun barks under computer guidance. But the most insane use of the M2 didn't come from a high-tech vehicle. It came from a single man in the jungle. During the Vietnam War, Marine legend Carlos Hathcock looked at the M2 and realized something nobody else had. Because the .50 caliber bullet is so massive, it is incredibly stable in flight. It ignores wind and cuts through the air like a laser. Hathcock clamped a telescopic sniper sight onto a tripod-mounted M2. He dialed the rear sight elevation, held his breath, and started firing single shots. He scored confirmed kills at mind-blowing distances where normal .30 caliber sniper rifles lost all stability. He turned a heavy machine gun into the deadliest sniper rifle in the world. His success directly inspired the creation of the famous Barrett M82 anti-material rifle. Think about that irony. A cartridge designed in World War I to kill tanks is now being used by two-man sniper teams to blow holes through the electronics of drones, radars, and parked aircraft from miles away. Weapons usually become obsolete in a decade, but today, 100 years after that first oversized cartridge rolled off the line, the number of nations buying the M2 keeps rising. Recruits still whisper the myth about the Geneva Conventions, and soldiers are still squeezing the same butterfly trigger. The internal locking surfaces inside the gun still match John Browning's original drawings from 1921. The M2 survived World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and it now rides atop autonomous turrets watching desert roads. It proves one brutal truth. Raw physics, once unlocked, rarely go out of style. But while the M2 was a masterpiece of American engineering, another famous American weapon became an absolute disaster that got countless soldiers killed. The history of warfare is full of deadly secrets and catastrophic failures. Click the video on your screen right now to fall down the next rabbit hole. I'll see you there.